Hello, welcome to this new and very exciting class where we will be running the comprehensive and informative OMniLead for the very first time in our work environment. For that, we will first of all go to this URL, which is gitlab.com OMniLeads, and also the OMniLead OML deploy tool. This is a new repository, a new component of OMniLead, which essentially condenses here the various different methods and techniques to effectively and efficiently deploy the application. On one hand, at the Docker Compose level, meaning essentially using Docker fundamentally in its operations, and on the other hand, using Ansible, that is, at the level of automating multiple instances. And on the other hand, finally, what would be the development environment and QA environment, right? Specifically. But well, for this class, we are going to focus here on the Docker Compose part in detail, which is what we will do to launch the application in our local environment throughout this course, step by step and thoroughly, to ensure a comprehensive understanding. First, we are going to initially focus on working in the local environment, and then, if all goes well, successfully move to a generic Linux to put the application in a production environment. So, let's navigate to the Docker Compose section and take a moment to review the documentation thoroughly. We start by looking at the requirements and understanding why they are important. And the requirement is to have Docker, meaning Docker definitely needs to be installed. Those who don't have it installed can install it on any of the 3 most commonly used operating systems. After having Docker installed, which is a platform used to develop, ship, and run applications, in my case I already have it installed and running here, proceed to download, clone this repository that will have all the necessary code and resources needed for the project, and ensure everything is set up correctly. I have the OML directory course available right here, and I will now proceed with the process of downloading this entire repository to my local machine. So, well, while I'm currently downloading this, I realize that I already have all the topics clearly and comprehensively outlined in the index. Docker Desktop is what we will use now, where we will be working on the first part of the course, focusing on unraveling and understanding what OMniLeads is about, studying its components and functionalities. Then we will have a part where, well, it's time to put it into production, maybe host it on some cloud VPS or a virtual machine, on some hypervisor, or perhaps even in a data center, perhaps. And well, after that, we will get into some minor security issues and some configuration matters. All right, we are actually going to be here in this class today. We can very clearly see that the repository has already completely finished cloning, as definitely indicated by the documentation. I go into the repository and right now I will immediately go to the Docker Compose folder. It is very important to have a code editor, which is a specialized tool for writing and editing code, because it allows you to view code graphically, not just through the terminal. So here we are going to find in this directory 3 specific and important files that we need to review and analyze. I'm going to carefully place this item here, in this specific spot on the table, as it is the most suitable and fitting place for it. I will come across a series of files that are designed to materialize, set up, configure, and manage different environments using Docker Compose efficiently and effectively. As we mentioned, it could be in a very local environment at the workstation level with Docker Desktop, but we also have the possibility of launching it using Docker Compose on a server as well. For example, we are going to focus here on this one, the most basic of all, Docker Compose YAML, the default one, and it is indeed the file that will materialize an OMniLeads instance. Here we actually have it, that is, all the individual components essentially working at the Docker Desktop level, so that later, from a web browser, you can directly point to localhost and access the web application at this point in time. This same environment in this particular setup also brings up an additional container that is specifically a component to effectively emulate, let's say, to simulate a connection with the PSTN. It will definitely be useful for us to make calls, transfers, understand what the recordings, reports, and other matters are all about. So we are going to materialize all the containerized components of OMniLeads using Docker Compose in a workstation environment in order to... What it essentially informs me is that you basically are required to make a copy of the env file, in essence. Here we have a file called environment, where all the necessary variables that are essential and critical for the application to function properly are located, including but not limited to the versioning of each image, each component, each container, each OMniLead component, to matters related to users, passwords, and some networking data, ensuring the application runs smoothly, that we will not delve into in this class. I'm simply going to focus on this, make a copy of it, and rename it as .environment with a dot in front. And then we will simply and easily follow the comprehensive documentation that clearly indicates we need to do a Docker Compose appd. That's it. It's all there, step by step. In my particular case, I had already downloaded all the necessary images beforehand, which meant that the application was able to start up immediately without any delays or additional downloads required. In the case of the first run of the application, well, there will be some time where all these components pull the OMniLead image from Docker Hub. If we can go to Docker Hub, a cloud-based repository where Docker users and partners create, test, store, and distribute container images, and put OMniLead here, we would see the OMniLead repository, which is a specific repository for our project. Well, here in OMniLead, we have all these images that we have been talking about. These images are published every time one of the components sends an update. And, well, from the environment file, which is a configuration file that contains settings and parameters, we manage that versioning. This is the versioning that will launch the application, and as I said, the first time it is launched or when an image is new, it has to be downloaded. In this case, Docker Compose PS shows that everything is indeed up, and all the components are currently up. I don't see anything in restarting, everything is definitely in status up. This is extremely important because I could already just actually come and basically do this on localhost. At most, occasionally there is a page that says 503, which indeed means the application is still currently starting up, but in my case the application is definitely up and running on localhost, which is great. Therefore, the initial step that I'm going to do at first is to execute this particular command. Notice that there is a bash script referred to as OMLmanage, which has several options. A help command will show that it has various functionalities. The first thing I'm going to do is this password reset, which is for the first time the application is started or when you want to reset the password. You execute it, and this will set the password to admin. The password reset, we log in, and the first time we log in, it asks us to reset that password and set a new one. At this point, I am already inside the application. If I can navigate through the different options, honestly speaking, there isn't much to see because we only have one user created and nothing else. But simply by invoking the management command once again, this time around I will pass the necessary parameter to properly initialize the environment, namely the command init-env, which stands for initialize environment. This will now make my OMniLeads instance completely and thoroughly prepared and completely ready to make all kinds of calls and navigate through all the various different menus available. As you can very clearly see, it now generates 2 agent type users, 1 supervisor type user, 1 manager type user, and well, this part we won't see yet, but it has to do with WebRTC or video call functionality, which is a very essential feature for modern communication systems. I will also certainly and definitely have campaigns, including a preview campaign, and in each campaign my users will indeed already be assigned. This is a way to quickly have an environment up and running without having to create forms, ratings, breaks, campaigns, users, etc. As I mentioned earlier, this course is more focused on the management and oversight of the application from a technical point of view. I won't go into the detailed use of the web application itself from the front end. There is another comprehensive course aimed specifically at administrators, the people who use this application and the interface to carry out various contact center operations. So, with this information already generated and compiled, I will open another browser, also on localhost, to test my agents with additional details. So now I'm going to access this. As you can see, it's all in the documentation as it says here in the Access Interface section. Here is the part about resetting the password, which is crucial for security, and here is the part about initializing the environment, which is essential for setup. Then I log in with the password provided to the users. All users have the same password, which is user0*, a default password. So, I'm logging into localhost with my agent logged in, ensuring that all configurations are correct. On the other hand, I'm going to have the supervision open, and for example, I'm going to directly bring a contact from the preview campaign and search for it, making sure all details are accurate. Since I already have a preview campaign assigned, this is simply what I mentioned about the PSTN emulator. If you check here in the trunk section, there's this command I ran to initialize the environment, which generates a trunk against the PBX emulator. This is actually a container that we said comes by default here in Docker. If we go to the final part, here is the PBX emulator, which is the name of the service that brings up a PSTN emulator. The idea is that we can make all kinds of calls, both outgoing and incoming. You see that now I get ready, I activate myself, and now I invoke the OMniLeads command, but I put it like this: call generate. It generates an incoming call. Whenever you make a call, there is always some pleasant music playing in the background. This music is simply there to inject some audio into the call experience. However, it doesn't really matter to me because I already have my 2 calls on this side, and they are sufficient for my needs. On the supervisor's side of the operations, I have my agents here on pause, currently not engaged in any active tasks but ready to resume work at a moment's notice. I could suddenly open another browser with the other agent as it is. As proposed, we could have one agent in one browser, meaning we could have 2 agents, agent 1 and agent 2, which I can also pause with both agents. Both have the possibility of already being inside a preview campaign, so they can currently dial here right now to see Eileen's status. And well, here I have my pair of representatives. For incoming telephone calls, basically, essentially, always use this command call generate, always within the Docker composed directory, where we have the OMLmanage utility. When I invoke the function using the FLAC file format, specifically with the call generate parameter, there is a possibility that I might receive a call, which I can experiment with and manipulate to some extent. My plan is to transfer this call from one agent to another agent. The goal is for the call to seamlessly reach the second agent that I have set up in the Firefox browser. However, there is a caveat. The call might get cut off because it was originally a cutoff call. To see that, depending on the ending of the number, The call will last more or less. Here is an explanation in the README section, detailing the factors that influence call duration. It depends on what number the call ends with, so the call can last more or less. Additional details about this are provided in the README section. But well, the purpose of this video, of this chapter, is to specifically focus here on the very important Docker desktop part. What I am doing is this. Notice that I am actually logged in as an admin user. I could perhaps use the manager user 0*, the password with this. Well, the first time I log in, it makes me change it too, because it is the first time I log in with this manager user. This user manager is also created when initializing the environment. I am now using this user. Can we also view the recordings as a comprehensive and detailed list, including all the ones we have been making and organized by each campaign? Well, the name of the file, which I was mentioning earlier, well, the main idea behind it was to get this entire system up and running smoothly and efficiently, ensuring that everything works as intended. Here I am logging in with localhost because it is running on my local environment, which is how we will be working throughout this first chapter. Here I currently have an agent. Here I have an agent in Chrome. I have another agent in Firefox, and in the other browser, Brave, I have my manager or supervisor user, respectively, as well. So we have completed this first part of the process, and now we will proceed to go into a bit more detail on this topic. The emulation container is actually trunked against the asterisk that OMniLeads brings inside, and this asterisk, instead of dialing the PSTN, dials against it and injects these recordings that we have been listening to, this music. Just like when I do a call generate, I'm actually basically and essentially making it send a channel, establish a channel with this asterisk. And this asterisk obviously sends the call to the agents, and that's where the call takes place. It ends, and then we have the logs and recordings and so on. Here we currently have the reporting section with the 2 preview calls and the 2 incoming calls. That is 4 calls in total so far. So, well, that's all for today's class. Please keep in mind to work with the default Docker Compose YAML file format, and also ensure that you are using the correct version, thus running the command. Previously, I generated the ISL copy to create the environment point, which is the environment variables file that Docker Compose will use to bring up the stack. So, with the stack up, we conclude this class.